Hello, hello, hello. This is Irina Strunina, and this is our masterclass series. Today we have again our guest, our host, Luis Bertus. He is PA, and he is going to talk about carbs, refined carbs versus complex carbs. If you think that you know someone who could use this information, please invite them. Hello, Liz.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. And we are anxious to see what you have for us, what you have prepared for us. So let's dive in. I will disappear from the screen. You please share your screen and we will go from there. All
All
right?
right, thank you. Okay, so hello, Diabetes 101 group. This also was supposed to be streaming live on some of my other platforms. So anyone in Diabetes 180 or my diabetes business page, you'll be watching this recorded. It was meant to be live, but I apologize about that. You'll still get the information though. So that's what's the most important thing. All right. And so let's go ahead and switch over to the presentation of the hour simple versus complex carbs. So carbs, of course, if you're diabetic, is a loaded word, maybe a word that brings fear and dread. uh, and I think a lot of that is because of a lot of miseducation, a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding about what carbs is. Carbs, it's really hard if you've been trying to do a low carb diet, because carbs are everywhere and in everything. And if you're trying to avoid carbs, it's like, what do I eat then, right? I can't eat air. I can't live off water. So I really hope that this presentation can simplify what are safe carbs for consumption versus what are carbs that are more harmful to our body. We're going to go through a lot of the biochemistry of how carbohydrates are broken down in our liver, metabolized and used for energy. And we'll also really understand the difference between what makes a carbohydrate simple versus what makes it complex. Okay. I'll subtitled it the sugar connection because I think we really need to start to differentiate between the idea of sugar and carbs, because nowadays we call all carbs sugar, right? No matter if you're talking about orange or you're talking about pastries, it's all sugar, and that is really a misnomer. And we'll clarify that. What is meant by sugar and the connection between sugar and diabetes? Okay, so and then we'll of course have time to answer questions in the end. So the first question, the main question that this presentation answers is fructose. Is it food or poison? Okay, so fructose really is another term we hear referred to sugar. Fructose, you hear high fructose corn syrup, right? Is it food or is it poison? If you want to really go really deep into the biochemistry of this, I should say, the breakdown of fructose, I really recommend watching Dr. Lustig's YouTube presentation. It's titled "Sugar: The Bitter Truth." It was made in 2009. He's an endocrinologist that really specializes in educating the public on nutrition, specifically on the harmful effects of sugar. And a lot of his findings came from a book from 1957. So this is not new news. It's not some kind of new revolutionary information. It's been around for a long time. It's been well known, the harmful effects of sugar. Okay, and we'll understand what is sugar right now. So first, we have to understand what a carbohydrate is before we start labeling everything as sugar. So a carbohydrate basically is a molecule of sugar, either in a single form or in a chain of sugar molecules. So when carbohydrate is in a single form, it's called a monosaccharide. So single sugar molecules are monosaccharides, meaning one sugar molecule. Two sugar molecules are disaccharides. And if you have a long chain of sugar molecules, they're called starch or polysaccharides. Examples are starch or fiber. So there are different types of monosaccharides or single sugar molecules, but it's important to understand that whether it's a single sugar molecule or a long chain of sugar molecules, these are all referred to as carbohydrates. Okay, whether it's a single sugar molecule or a long chain of sugar molecules, we all in science call these carbohydrates. But obviously, there's a difference between a single sugar molecule and a long chain of sugar molecules. Okay, so if you think of simple carbs is a single link, a single chain, right, of sugar molecule, versus a complex carb being a long chain of sugar molecules. Um, and I like to use this chain illustration because which is stronger, which is harder to break, a single chain or a long chain? Obviously, a long chain is a lot stronger, a lot more durable. And that's what you want in your diet. You want complex carbs, long chains of sugar molecules, and not single sugar molecules. Okay, because the single sugar molecules, or the molecules of sugar that have been isolated and refined and processed down to its simplest form, are going to process a lot faster in your body, right? They're going to be digested and absorbed a lot quicker than those complex carbs, those long chains of sugar molecules found in starchy vegetables, fruits, or in their whole complex whole forms, fiber-rich legumes or grains. Okay, so we want to make sure we are differentiating between the two because they are absorbed and metabolized differently. So monosaccharides, there are many, but there are three that are most found in our foods day to day. The most common and widely spread form of monosaccharide is glucose. As we know, glucose is found in almost everything. And so it is really the main source of energy that our body uses. And then there's fructose, which is found in mainly fruits, and there's galactose, which is found in milk. All right, so these are all monosaccharides, but the glucose and fructose is what we're going to focus on in the next few slides, and you'll see that fructose and glucose are not the same. Okay, glucose, which is found in your bread, your pasta, your rice, your starches, is different than the fructose found in fruits and also its refined sources. Okay. So when you think of refined sources or sugar, the first thing you probably think of is table sugar, the pure white deadly stuff, right? So sugar, the actual chemical form name is sucrose. And sucrose is made of a molecule of glucose and fructose. So these two molecules come together, glucose and fructose, right? They're different, but they come together to make table sugar. Okay. So table sugar, is a refined or simple carbs, even though it's made of two sugar molecules. It's not made of a long chain of sugar molecules. Then we also have high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is actually sweeter than sugar, a lot sweeter, and it's also a lot cheaper than table sugar to make. So, which do you think your food company is going to prefer to use to sweeten its product? Obviously, the sweeter and the cheaper option, and that's why high fructose corn syrup is found in so many food products on the shelf today. So, high fructose corn syrup is actually of about 50%, 42 to 55% fructose and sucrose. All right. Fructose and glucose. Sucrose is 50% glucose and fructose. So we're going to go into basically the differences and why it's so important to understand the differentiation between the two. But they're very similar. Sucrose and high fructose corn syrup are very similar in that they're made of fructose and glucose coming together, combining to make this really sweet substance that we use to flavor our foods. Now, here is where we start to differentiate the two. Glucose and fructose are metabolized differently in the body. See, glucose, as I said before, is a main substrate for energy that every organ in your body can use and wants to use for energy. Okay. So, glucose is that main source of energy. And that's why every organ in your body can use glucose for energy, from your brain to your feet can use glucose for energy. Now, the liver is very important because the liver's job is to basically take in everything that comes into the body and to filter it and either detoxify it or to use it for energy. So, liver is very important. And when you eat something that has glucose in it, the liver takes up 20% of that. 80% of the rest of that food source goes to the body to provide it with energy. So again, so here's examples of foods that are full of glucose. So as you know already, bread, cereals, pasta, rice, potatoes, beans, nuts, legumes, right? Now, this is the difference between fructose and glucose. Unlike glucose, fructose is not used anywhere but the liver. So fructose can't be used in the brain. The brain can't use it for energy. The muscles can't use it for energy. All right. Only the liver can take in fructose and metabolize it and break it down and use it for energy, or break it or distribute its end products to the body. So unlike glucose, fructose is directed like a guided missile to that liver. You could already see probably the problem with this, right? Uh, we have a lot of fructose in this table sugar. We have a lot of fructose in high fructose corn syrup, a lot more than is found in nature. And now I want to give a word of caution to watch this to the end, because some people may stop here and think, well, that's why I can't eat fruit, right? That's why you have to limit your fruit intake because too much fruit is bad for you. That is not the case, okay? Fruit is not poison, and you'll understand the difference between and the reason why that is, I should say, at the end of this presentation. But ethanol is another thing I want to talk about, because or alcohol, it actually behaves a lot similar to fructose. So I would say, if you can see the similarities between ethanol or alcohol metabolism and fructose metabolism, you'll understand why we need to stay away from fructose as much as possible in its refined forms. Okay, so just like or similar to fructose, ethanol is guided like a missile to your liver. Only its advantage is that it at least can go, some of it can still be metabolized in the brain, the rest of the body. So fructose is not glucose because of the reasons we just mentioned, but these are three important other reasons. So it does not suppress ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hormone that helps actually stimulate the hunger, desire and craving for food. And also, it does not stimulate insulin or leptin. Insulin or leptin and leptin, they have a lot of jobs in the body, but one of the most important jobs is to help suppress your appetite. So if you think about it, if it's not suppressing ghrelin and it's not stimulating insulin or leptin, it's making you stay hungry. All right. And also, again, fructose is not metabolized. It's only metabolized in the liver. This is far different than glucose. That we'll see that in the slides going forward. So when we eat, let's say a standard 120 calories, okay, let's say 2 slices of Wonder Bread, okay. Now this might require some math, and I'm going to break down the chemistry of this. So go ahead and put your thinking caps on now. We're going to do some deep thinking now. So let's say we take 2 slices of bread, understanding what we know about glucose and its metabolism. How much of that is going to end up in the liver? Say this circle is a symbol of a liver cell. 20% of 120 of those 120 calories will end up in your liver, which means about 24 calories goes to the liver, and the rest is distributed throughout the body, right, evenly. And so the liver takes 20%, and it takes the glucose, and once it goes inside the cell, it gets converted into what's called glucose 6-phosphate, which is basically a form of glucose that allows it essentially to be trapped inside the cell. So it cannot easily exit the cell without the help of like adrenaline glands. So the glucose 6-phosphate, a lot of that is also going to be converted into glycogen. Glycogen is a storage form of energy. So glycogen is your liver's way of storing that food energy found in glucose for later use, so that when it's needed, it can break it down, okay, and use it for energy. And so a lot of that glucose is going to turn into glycogen and be used for energy. The glucose also goes through another pathway, and this is a lot more complicated than I'm making it. Okay, so if you want to go more into the science behind this, then I definitely recommend watching the video that I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture. But citrate is another uh, result of the glucose entering the cell. So glucose enters the cell, it goes through another pathway called the Krebs cycle, and this produces citrate. Citrate goes through a pathway which produces a VLDL, which is a very low density lipoproteins. And we know this, of course, is not a good thing. It's another term for it is de novo lipogenesis. Now, I want to say this too very carefully. Even though some of that glucose can turn into fat, in the form of lipid LDL, it's a very small amount. It's not much at all. Okay, and if you wanted to quantify it, of the 24 calories, it's probably like half a calorie. I mean, it's negligible. Okay, so multiple studies have shown that glucose entering the cell and turning into fat, because a lot of people say carbs will make you fat. This is actually something that's really misunderstood, because the amount of fat that's resulted from the intake of glucose is very small, almost negligible. But it does happen, okay? So there is a bit of those calories. There's a small amount that can turn into fat, which will feed triglycerides throughout the body, just and also a form of energy for later, right? Another very important thing to note with glucose that when you have glucose enter the body, it increases insulin in the body. We all know that. So insulin, one of its many jobs is to suppress the appetite. It tells you that you've eaten enough, Lewis, you could stop. So it makes you feel full, satisfied with your meal, so that you close the kitchen. So now moving on, I want to compare this to alcohol, right? So let's say we have a shot of whiskey, 120 calories of alcohol. 80% of that's going to end up in the liver. So that's about 96 calories. That's a big difference, right? So the same amount of calories, 120 calories of the alcohol versus 120 calories of the glucose. 24 calories went to the liver, 96 went to the liver if it's alcohol. So the alcohol goes into the liver without the aid, not needing insulin to help it. It just goes, it finds its way. It gets broken down into, we know, a poisonous substance, acetaldehyde. Not a good thing. We're not going to go into details of that. But it also goes through the same pathway that leads to citrate, which leads to VLDL, right? And again, we know VLDL increases the risk of heart disease, heart attacks, right? Strokes. Not a good thing. You don't want a lot of LDL running through your blood. But the problem is, the difference is the dose, okay? When you have 24 calories, only a small portion of that turning to LDL is not going to harm you. But when you have the more calories that the liver is overloaded with processing, the more LDL it's forced to create. So now it's got to process all these calories. It can only do so much for it. And notice the big difference with this alcohol. It doesn't produce glycogen, right? So it's not even like it could store some of that energy for later. Much of that ends up as liver fat, noted in the lipid droplet in the circle. A lot of that turns into free fatty acids, which float through your blood, causing muscle insulin resistance. Also feeding the triglycerides, right, that are also going to increase your risk of heart disease. And this is why many alcoholics or people struggle with alcohol routinely have fatty liver and other chronic diseases. Now, why are we talking about alcohol, right? We're supposed to be talking about carbs. Well, that's because there's an interesting similarity between how fructose is metabolized and how alcohol is metabolized. Now, we know that alcohol is a toxic substance, right? We know it's poison. But If something enters your liver and acts the same way alcohol does, then it must be poison too. And that's where we have to ask ourselves a question: is fructose poison? Because it acts just like alcohol. 100% of it goes to the liver, overwhelms the liver. Now, the difference is, you do have some glycogen that's going to be created from this fructose. So at least it can be good use for energy. That's a good thing. But 100% of that fructose goes to the liver, overwhelming the liver with work, right? And now, just to note, we have here the 60 calories in the upper left corner there. That's because we started off, let's say, with 120 calories. 120 calories of, let's say, orange juice. The 120 calories, now remember, if you were paying attention, half of that is glucose, half of that is fructose. So half of the 120 calories ends up in your liver. Are we following that math? Hopefully. So 60 calories ends up in the liver, which started out as 120 calories for your body. Half that's going to your liver. So we're not going to go into the details too much, but you can see some bad things happening here. It goes through a pathway that creates fructose 1-phosphate, which leads down another pathway, which increases your uric acid. We know uric acid is not a good thing, right? Anyone struggle with gout? Uric acid levels increasing in the body also are responsible for high blood pressure, hypertension, a problem for anyone, right? It also goes down that same pathway, which produces a lot more citrate than glucose, especially in its complex form, leading to more fat creation in the form of LDL, lipid droplets, free fatty acids, which lead to muscle insulin resistance. As we know, through many studies, that fat in tissues not designed to store fat, or to say not designed to store large amounts of fat, will lead to your body resisting insulin and making it hard for insulin to work. This happens in your liver. This happens in the muscles, right? And as we already said, fructose does not stimulate the production of insulin and leptin, so you're left still feeling hungry. That's why you can drink all the orange juice and all the apple juice you want and still be hungry, right? And a lot of these very sugary beverages or snacks leave you unsatisfied because it doesn't shut off the hunger drive. And so that way you can say, well, yeah, fructose is poison. So this is just some studies that show you how different fructose is from the metabolism of glucose. Fructose increases de novo lipogenesis in normal adults. This is a chart that kind of compares glucose rising in fat production versus fructose rising in fat production after the consumption of a high fructose meal, right? Glucose stays stable. There's not much fat production there. But when you have meals that or beverages or drinks or pastries that are full with the sugary substance called high fructose corn syrup, a lot more of that can turn into fat. All right. And this is 6 days of normal adults on a diet that consisted of mainly fructose. Now, of course, this is not normal. Most of us are not going to go 6 days of eating nothing but sugar. Okay. So, but they just show you how detrimental this is, right? Triglycerides were doubled. De novo lipogenesis, so that's what DNL stands for. The formation of fat went up by 5 times. The creation of free fatty acids also doubled. Now, to note, this is if you decided to sit down and eat nothing but sugar all day. Okay, it's not something that happens normally and naturally in nature. But ask yourself, man, how easy it is to limit sugar. Is not easy at all because sugar is addictive, right? The more you have it, the more you want, the more you want, and once you understand the fact that this sugar is a toxic substance to your body, it makes you pause a little bit. And so I want to bring you to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There's a reason why it's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is because most people who had fatty liver disease for the longest time, it was because of alcohol. we knew that alcohol causes fatty liver disease, right? It's something that, as I don't know how long alcohol's been around, I guess since the dawn of time, but we've known for the longest time that if you drink too much alcohol too frequently, too often, it can lead to this damaged liver. But in modern times, we started getting people in our offices as physicians, who had fatty liver disease but weren't alcoholics. They didn't drink alcohol, right? You would say, Mr. Smith, you need to stop. You need to lay off the alcohol, and Mr. Smith would tell you, "I don't drink alcohol, Lewis. Are you don't insult me, right?" And then I would, maybe think they were lying, right? But the reality is, it's the sugar. And of course, fat has a big part of it too. There's too much fat in our diets, and I covered that last month. But also sugar, and when we overload our liver in this way, can lead to fatty liver disease. So, answering the question, is fructose food or poison? It really depends on where it comes from. So, when fructose is coming from refined sources, pastries, beverages, snacks, cakes, it's poison. But when fructose is coming from whole food sources like apples and kiwis and oranges and bananas, it is not poison. And you think about it, this makes sense because poison, it's all in the dose, really, right? You can overdose from water. Think about it, right? There's people who have drinking water till their kidneys burst, right? So even the good things in nature, when abused and used in a way that's unnatural to mankind, become poison. And that's what's happened with food industry, right? We've taken food in its natural state and we've refined it and we've processed it down, taken all the good stuff out of it and leaving us with a dose of poison. So this is a funny thing they do. They start to hide the name of sugars because now a lot of the public is wise to the fact that sugar is poison. And so instead of calling it sugar, they call it 75 different other things to trick you into uh not not noticing what they've done to this food product. And that's why it's so important to read labels. But I go even further than that and say it's important to limit your use of food items that require labels. What do I mean by that? If you're eating a lot of produce, whole foods, real foods don't have food labels. Think about that, right? Because it's real. All right. So, but if you are going to eat foods that have food labels on them, make sure you're watching out for those hidden names of sugar. This is some examples of the many products on the shelves. I tried to put them all, but obviously I ran out of space that includes sugar. It's amazing to me that almost every bread, um, a bread company has sugar as like a second ingredient, because your bread got to be sweet, I guess, right? But really, this is it. It comes down to this. We know that the brain hooked on sugar is a repeat customer, right? So don't want to spend too much time on that, but the normal brain right here versus a cocaine brain user and the brain of a person addicted to sugar. The cocaine user and the sugar user, their brains are looking pretty similar, right? And that's because regular sugar consumption leads to addiction. And we know this. There's actually been a old study from Peter Milner and James Olds that experimented with a lab rat, which got him hooked on sugar, and he stimulated himself to death. Did everything he could to get more sugar. He stopped eating foods. He stopped mating. He stopped sleeping. He stopped caring for his basic needs because he wanted more sugar. Now, if you think to yourself, well, I'm not a lab rat. I'm smarter than a lab rat. But how many of us are literally killing ourselves, right, for that sugar? And I'm not saying this judgmentally because I'm talking about myself too, right? We know how addicting this substance is, but let's not confuse ourselves or misinform ourselves anymore. Let's not be miseducated. There is a big difference between the sugar or the carbs in nature and the carbs from laboratory. The difference is the latter is sugar. So this is a old statement from the FDA, and I'm just going to read the highlighted portion. It says, "A food shall be deemed to be adulterated if it bears or contains any poisonous or deleterious substance which may render it injurious to health." And then let's jump down to the last part of the yell. So what it's saying is that a food, if it's poisonous or injurious to the health, then this food is deemed by the FDA to be adulterated, right? It's bad. Perfect example: tobacco and well, I guess tobacco is not a food, but alcohol. Okay, so the FDA poses strong restrictions on foods that are poisonous or harmful to the health. However, look at the last part. But always be careful when you see a but, right? But not with the prevention of chronic diseases, even though its own regulations explicitly postulate the connection between such products and such diseases. So, in other words, if this poison, this food poison, is killing you quickly, the FDA will step in. But if it's killing you slowly, causing you chronic disease, that's on you. That's on you, right? So that's on us to make decisions that are best for our health. We cannot expect the government to step in. All right. So that's enough of that. Now we're going to go into the good stuff, right? The stuff that is good for us, complex carbs. All right. And we're just wrapping up. There's not many slides left, but whole plant based foods are what we want to increase in our diet. Whole plant based foods are complex. They're not simple. They're not made of one or two sugar molecules. They're made, like we saw in the beginning, of a chain of molecules linked together. And because of this, they digest a lot slower. They're absorbed into the body a lot slower. They also include a lot of good things for our health: water, antioxidants, phytochemicals, micronutrients, macronutrients, right? But what I want to focus on is the main difference between the simple and the complex, and that is fiber. Everyone knows what fiber is. I don't know if everyone knows how it works, though. But fiber, when found in nature and when found in complex foods or complex carbs, it does many good things. One of the main things I said already is that it slows the absorption of calories. So that apple or that orange, when you eat it, is not rushing to your liver. The fruit, yeah, there's fructose in apple, there's fructose in orange, but it's not going to go quickly to your liver like orange juice and apple juice would, right? It slows its absorption like a foot on a gas pedal, on a brake pedal, sorry, so that it doesn't overwhelm the liver, and the amount of fat or that, if you're worried about that, produced is very small, even negligible. The amount of calories that turn into energy is very small. And so there's another amazing thing about fiber is that it's 0 calories. So essentially has no calories. Now, technically, fiber does have a small amount of calories, but it's negligible because by the time it exits into your stool, the amount of calories is actually pulled from the food in your stomach and your intestines. It basically added nothing to your meal. So it's a great way to eat more yet still have less calories at the end of the day. Fiber in itself is 0 calories. And it also lowers your cholesterol levels. So fiber is something you want in your diet in abundance because it's going to mix up with that sugar, it's going to mix up with the fat, and it's going to cause some of this, most of it, or a lot of it, to be trapped. A lot of it will be exited through your stool, so you don't absorb all your food that you're eating. Yet in itself, it adds no calories. So fiber is something that you find only in whole foods, whole plant-based foods, I should say. So think of fiber as the antidote to the poison. Okay, so fiber helps slow down digestion and absorption of excess calories, so that your liver and your muscles and your body cells never get overwhelmed with unneeded caloric energy at any time. Right? It's given the right amount of energy in the right balance at the right times and the right speed without overwhelming the body system. This is why it's so important. We are living in an age of fiber deficiency. Most Americans are not obtaining enough fiber in their diet. And the only way to get fiber in your diet is from whole foods. There's other reasons and benefits of fiber as we come close to the end. So this is a long list. I'll just read it. Anti-inflammation, aids in the immune system, uh, aids the immune system, anti-obesity activity, cardioprotection, hepatoprotection, so it protects the liver, anti-diabetic activity, it's great for diabetics, and prevention and also reversal, anti-cancer activity, neuroprotective activity, antibacterial activity, healthy gut microbiome. There's so many reasons why we need to increase fiber in our diet. And that's why in my program, I really, really push and encourage my clients to increase their amount of whole plant-based foods in their diet. It's medicine. Really quick, in our last few slides, we're going to compare some foods. So see the difference between steel cut oats, rolled oats, and quick oats. You could see it right there. There's a big difference between the three in that, the steel cut oats obviously seem a lot more closer to its original source. And this is what you want to ask yourself when you're making food choices. Ask yourself, how close is this food item to its original state? The further that food item is from its original state, the more refined it is, right? Quick oats is a little further from its original state. Steel cut oats is a little closer to original state. Therefore, it digests slower, right? And it's better for you. Brown versus white rice is another good example. Brown rice is a lot closer to its original state than white rice is, okay? Whole wheat flour versus white flour. In the left corner, we have a picture of wheat berries, right? So whole wheat flour is still refined, but it's still closer to its original state than white flour is. All right. So if you can make the choice between one or the other, you want whole wheat, right? So this is another good example of the calorie effect of whole foods. The fact that whole plant-based foods have very low calories, are very low in calories, even though they fill you up. And the difference is because of the fiber in the foods. So consider oil, cheese, and meat, which have no fiber, right? And versus potatoes, beans, rice, fruits, and veggies that are filled with fiber. 500 calories of the latter two, potatoes, beans, rice, fruits, and veggies, will fill you up a lot quicker than 500 calories of these other foods that are lower in fiber. Another quick example of plant-based foods, low in calories and how much they fill you. Whole grains, rice, beans, legumes, potato, corn, all these things can fill you a lot quicker and physically fill you before you're calorically full. That makes sense. And this is a few more pictures here. Both of these foods contain about 420 calories. One serving of hearty sweet potato and squash soup, and 3.5 tablespoons of olive oil, right? 2 Oreos have the same amount of calories as 2 cups of cubed cantaloupe. Which one's going to fill you up, though, right? A half cup of dried apricots has the same amount of calories as 9 whole apricots. Are you seeing the importance of eating foods in its whole state? 3 tablespoons of peanut butter versus 1 large baked potato. Which one's going to fill you up, right? So when you're not including these whole foods in your diet, what often happens, you struggle with weight gain, you struggle with reading your weight goals, because most of the foods that you're now eating are rich in calories, but they're poor in nutrition, they're poor in fiber, so they're not really filling you up, but you're filling up your calories pretty quick. So I hope that makes sense. That really is the end of my presentation. I try to keep it to 40 minutes, and I hope I did. But yep, I guess we'll take this time to answer questions.
Well, yes, thank you, Luis. You did fit in 40 minutes. I do not see questions right
Okay.
now. Please expect questions under the post when you go back to the video. We may have posts
Okay.
there because I know there were questions if we will have recording, and we do, and it will be posted in our Facebook group. The question I've got.
Sure.
So I I see that uh, a lot of food comparison and everything that you posted show the pictures of demonstrated this comparison between, well, green leafy vegetables and say potatoes and meat and oil, right? So I know that this is common to in our community, in diabetic community, that doctors and nutritionists and dietitians are recommending to use more of leafy vegetables, green vegetables like broccoli or Brussels sprouts, or and stay don't use that much of those vegetables such as potatoes and carrots because they have
Starchy,
higher.
starchy vegetables. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say? What, because you see our group is for beginners. People just got into the group, just got this diagnosis. They sometimes confused. They don't know what they can eat. So what would you say in how how much they can use of those potatoes,
Yeah.
say?
It's a good question. So everyone's different in their diabetes as well. So it's a, it's a spectrum disease. Some everyone's on a different place in the spectrum. So there are maybe people who can tolerate potatoes.
Mhm.
And it's definitely worth experimenting with because you want to include as much food as you can allow yourself. You don't want to limit what you can do, what you don't
Yes.
have to. However, if a person is struggling with hyperglycemia from, plant starchy vegetables, then they might have to limit that. That being said, if you're on the mindset that, hey, I don't want to limit those foods, that's when you have to go towards the what diabetes 180 teaches and emphasizes, going towards the more whole food route. You have to also really decrease the amount of fat in the diet. That's
Mhm.
your oils, your butters, your creams, meats, dairy. Things that are higher in fat have to decrease so that you can, at the same time, increase those carbs, those starchy, including starches, without spikes in your blood sugar.
Okay.
But yeah.
So basically, it's not that on one day I decided that I will be using a lot of vegetables, but
Mhm,
I don't want to give up my cheese and
mhm.
my meat, so I will combine it all.
Yeah,
What?
exactly.
So
Everyone's going to find what they like, because I do know many diabetics working with that they can tolerate starchy vegetables, and maybe but I always encourage to know yourself and what your goals are.
mhm,
What is your goals, and so that's really important. And I think it's nice to know that there's options.
yes,
You don't have to stick with, oh well, I can only do the low carb, I can only do keto. There's options.
yes,
There's an option, and I love that there's an option that allows you to increase more wholesome foods in your diet.
absolutely. One quick question before we have to go, we have to wrap up. This question is coming up again and again, and you probably could even guess what I'm going to ask.
Sure, maybe.
I read multiple times in different sources that if you cook your rice or potato or pasta and then put it in the refrigerator and then take it out, the carbs turn from the simple carbs into complex carbs. Have you heard about it?
I've never heard that, and I don't see why that would be true. Yeah.
And I know that because this topic coming up again and again in the group, next time I will tag you when we have this discussion.
I'd like to do
The
some research on that. Yeah, that
the
sounds it's interesting. I've never heard that theory. And like off the top of my head, I can't see the science behind it. But yeah, I definitely like to see if there are people talking about. There's a reason. So yeah.
I know that for some people, as you said, we all are different. For some people, it works.
Mhm.
and they say, I am so happy that I read about it and I tried. And after I cook it, this send my food through this process, cook it, refrigerate it, reheat it, and it doesn't spike me. But some people saying it's not working for me at all. I just cannot do that.
Anything's worth trying.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, Luis, thank you very much for your time. Thank
Yeah.
you very
Pleasure.
much for your information. I think those people who were watching it, I needed the pen and paper to write it down because
Okay.
there are some information that I am simplifying for myself. So I
Good.
think that this is something that we all learn. We have all different learning styles. So that's how I read the listen to presentations. Some people don't need that the
Yeah.
way how I do, but nevertheless, I appreciate you putting it all together. So for people who are looking for the whole food diet, for people who are trying to uh, kind of stay away from meats and fats and trying to heal themselves this natural way with the just fruits, vegetables.
Mhm.
This is a good way to go and way of thinking of it and looking at it. And they also can always contact you
Yes.
to have a consultation if they need to, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm easy to find. You could find me with my name, lewisbertus .com
Yes.
or Lewis at lewisbertus.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We will wrap up. We are pretty much on the dot, and let's plan. I don't know how we'll do in December because it's a holiday season,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we
We'll,
will
we'll, uh,
talk and
we'll,
see
we'll
what we
talk
can
about it.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As always, nice talking with you.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.